Okay, it's 6 o'clock, and welcome to Beaver Politics, everybody. I'm Treaty Six Birder, and this is Indigenous Matters. And we have Indigenous Matters every Monday night from 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time until 7 or 8 o'clock, depending on our conversation. Tonight, I do have to kind of cut it short because I have an early flight in the morning. So I still haven't packed and got my stuff ready for my day tomorrow. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the Liberal Party leadership debate and what was discussed during the debate. And that can maybe lead us into some conversation about the major parties that run federally in Canada and their Indigenous platforms. And we can also talk about any other topic that seems pressing or urgent and that folks want to chat about around the table. Last week we did have a gentleman by I recall that his name was Terry, but I didn't catch his last name and I didn't see a new follower with that name. And he wanted to chat about cows and plows. So if you're in the room, you're welcome to join us and we can have that conversation. But yeah, so let's have a little bit of a discussion about the Liberal Party leadership debate. And anyone else that wants to come up, let me know. You're welcome to hit that request button and join us. So I'll turn it over. ZB and I were chatting, but I'll turn it over to Curtis and let you
Awesome.
tell us what you're thinking.
My thoughts on that is, how did the Ontario election go? I know that you guys were running it, and how did it all go?
That went awful.
It didn't go well. So actually, then interesting you just brought that up too, because I just watched a TikTok and Doug Ford is talking already, like what the election was just Thursday, and he's already talking about building that all-weather road to Northern Ontario to access the mines. And what a great benefit this is going to be to the First Nations up there, because it's going to give them cheaper food and they can have, better access to all the services they need and stuff. But I've been to those communities. I actually was consulting for a mining company, and I was their consultant that went up there in the day to consult to go and meet with a couple of the nations up there. I didn't stick around too long because it wasn't in line with my values and integrity. I felt really awful actually to be up there and trying to sell these mines to these folks who, honestly, Curtis and ZB, these folks live off the land. They still fish daily. They hunt. They speak the language. The kids learn their language first. They're mostly out of OG Cree up there. It's just beautiful community. It's fly-in only. Both of the communities I went to, and they're just rich with their culture. And yeah, they do have to pay a lot for groceries at their northern store. Like, I did spend a couple nights in these communities and had to go get my own groceries and stuff because we got to stay at the nursing station. But and it was outrageously expensive. But what scares me for these folks up there is when these roads come up, so does everything else. Your MMIW goes up, substance abuse goes up. People start losing connection to land because now you have a road and it's a little easier to go to town, or it's easier for other people to come up to your community too, and like especially rec users and non-Indigenous hunters and fishing folks that they always leave a footprint on the land. So that's out of that Ontario election, that's kind of one of the scary outcomes I feel like from an Indigenous perspective, is how eager that conservative government in Ontario is to open the north up and really change the way of life of the First
Ford's back,
Nations
eh?
there.
Isn't he the one that was smoking the pipe?
It was his brother.
That was his brother? Okay.
Yeah, his brother was the mayor of Toronto, I think, and had a little bit of a problem with the pipe. But yeah,
Peace pipe.
yeah, yeah. So, it's unfortunate. We did our part. We tried really hard to reach out to our Indigenous family and friends over in Ontario. And, I think we all, we've been talking about this for a while at Beaver Politics, is how we get our people to vote. And I'm scared for them now. I'm really scared for them because what that Ontario government may try to be doing, and I heard him say it on this video that I just watched before we started up tonight, is we need to get rid of some of this regulatory process, he was saying, like impact assessments and stuff. Well, that impact assessment process is where we identify how our rights are going to be impacted. If we're not doing impact assessments, we can't understand how the environment's being impacted, and our rights are tightly connected to environment. Like we don't practice rights without intact, healthy land, water, forests, whatever ecosystem it is that we're pursuing our resources in. And it scares the heck out of me because one, like, all of us being Alberta based, I don't know how often you get to fly over Alberta, but when I look out at Alberta and I'm flying, I fly in all directions, so I've seen how the province looks from the air, from south to the north, and it's cut up to pieces. Like, I'm pretty sure I've told you all, I have data that shows that there's only 9% of Alberta left intact. But when I fly over Ontario, you can look out as far as the eye can see and you see forest. You might see the odd road, a little smattering of, a settlement, like a little hamlet or something, but you don't even see a lot of towns. There's not, the exploration like we see here with pipelines and seismic and all of that. So it's a little alarming, I think, from an Indigenous perspective in Ontario and what they might be facing now. It's like Fort
It's not
McMurray's
even
coming.
that, right? Like you notice it even when you drive through Alberta. Like the water is so much lower, like
Yeah.
every time that I drive home.
Well, and you would
Right.
think about, remember when they used to buffer the highways? So, like, there was like, especially for us that are in the bush, we go out on the land, we know there's clear cuts around. But, like, even I think about driving from Edmonton to Grand Prairie, and you'd see like forest the whole way because they were trying to buffer those clear cuts so that, to give that impression of an intact forest. They've even stopped
Yeah.
doing that here. They don't do that anymore here. They'll cut right up to highways.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I remember years ago at Awapiskat, there was they got like 1% or less of the diamond revenue of that big diamond mine there. Like things like that happened in the past, And that diamond, I think they got 2 million a year, and then the diamond mine was getting like 400 to 500 million in revenue a year. Like those type of things happened, in their territory.
And like that's a drop in the bucket. Those are like the $2 million for an annual payment can be the operating costs on within a week they spend. So it's really unfair the way that consultation should be working towards protecting land for for us to practice rights.
Pause.
Yeah.
Uh, Somebody sent in a request to
Okay.
come up on the panel.
Thank you.
Sorry for
Oh,
cutting you off.
it's okay. I got it. Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that. But at the same time as protecting land for the practice of rights, there should also be some form of economic benefit related to these projects, and not just a drop in the bucket. Did you say $2 million a year where some of these were getting paid out? Well, meanwhile,
Yeah,
so
if Google Attawapiskat Diamond Mine,
okay.
and it's closed now. But when they were up a few years ago, there was a diamond mine just outside of the reserve, and just put Attawapiskat Diamond Mine, and it'll bring it up. And they were getting 2 million a year. That was like less than 1% of the annual revenue. They were getting some years they were making 400 million a year, and some years they were making 500 million a year. This diamond mine, and it went for like I don't know how many years it went for, but when diamond mines go on average 10 to 15 years, right, at their lifespan, depending
Yeah.
how much diamonds there is. But like that's such a small percentage. It's not very it's very minimal, eh? Not even minimal. It's like like it's less than a percentage of what they were giving to the First Nation there.
Well, and I'm looking at it right now online here, and I'm looking at the images.
Yeah,
Look at the footprint of this
yeah, it's
mine.
huge. It's huge. They're not small. You see them from space.
Yeah. Same with the oil sands, right? Like we look at the oil sands in northeastern Alberta, which, I've been hearing some talk about these oil sands, and that really at the end of the day, they're not going to realize as much wealth as they've told us because of the costs associated with reclaiming, cleaning up all of that tailings specifically. The tailings is what the problem is with the oil sands mining operations. It's going to be a deficit for them, and they're probably likely then going to just abandon those mines and leave them for Alberta taxpayers to clean up. And in the backyard of the Fort McKay First Nation, the Fort McMurray First Nation, it's just down, river from ACFN and Mikisew and all the Métis that live up there as well. And they're going to be left with this legacy of pollution and water that they can't drink and wildlife that nobody wants to consume.
Also, they like big corporations aren't held to the standard that they actually do have to pay their fines. They do get fines, but they're not ever forced to pay them.
Right. Well, the AER. So we all heard about the Imperial leak that was happening up around the Curl oil sands operation in north of Fort McMurray. That went unreported to the downstream users, which is the Athabasca Chip First Nation and the Mikisew Cree and the Métis that reside in Fort Chip. They weren't told of any of this activity until somebody leaked it to them and they found out. And the Alberta Energy Regulator fined Imperial $50,000. That's like a penny to them. It's nothing. So even when they get fines, it's really not something that's going to hurt them. Do you know what I mean? Like they're not suffering because of it. It's quite alarming. And I was an Alberta Environment, Government of Alberta employee I was a Government of Alberta employee twice. The first time I worked for Alberta Environment as a Reclamation Approvals Coordinator, but then I moved into a position called Aboriginal Relations Advisor. But the second time I went to work for the Government of Alberta, I was with the Ministry of Indigenous Relations, and I was invited to participate in meetings with Alberta Environment to help guide them through consultation processes and engagement with First Nations and Métis. So I was invited to the tailings pond meetings, and I was in shock. Okay, I always believe that these people that work at Alberta Environment, and they are, but I believe they were professionals who cared to, have our back as Albertans, not just as Indigenous people, but as Albertans in general. And I was so dumbfounded to sit around this table and then hear them talking about they have no science and they had no technology or solution on what to do with the tailing ponds. And there's tens of thousands, if not millions of liters of contaminated water that's being held in those ponds. I don't know if you've ever seen them firsthand. I've flown over them in a helicopter. Like they barge across these ponds. That's how large they are. Like to get track hose from one side to the other, they actually have a barge that they barge across these tailing ponds. So the solution that they've come to, because CNRL, Suncor, Syncrude, they aren't coming to the table with the technology to deal with these tailing ponds. So they're talking about diluting them and dumping it all into the Athabasca River. Yes. This is the reality. And okay, it was 2017 when I worked there. That's almost a decade ago already. So spread the word. I think Albertans, and especially our people who live in those areas, need to know this. And this is all it's not out publicized, but if we wanted to FOIP the Government of Alberta, we could easily get the reports and the minutes around these meetings and stuff.
On the note of FOIP, do you guys follow Nitty?
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the one video, but she is being the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
Sounding the alarm, saying that they are denying FOIP requests about things that she knows 100% happened.
Oh, yeah.
So if we are going to do the FOIP request, we should get on that sooner than later. Because I do believe what she's saying to be her 100%. Theory is that the UPC government is doing what Donald Trump is doing, but they're being more quiet about it.
Oh, Jason Kenney started doing it. Okay, I was working for one of the First Nations in Musqueam, and we were being consulted on a coal mine near Hinton, and I filed a statement of concern on behalf of the nation I worked for to the Alberta Energy Regulator. And we were getting a lot of feedback. I mean, they weren't they didn't not give us standing, but they weren't really responding to us. So I decided I was going to FOIP Jason Kenney's office, the Alberta Energy Regulator, Energy and Mines, and Alberta Environment, because I wanted to see what is going on with the correspondence between the proponent and the government, because all of that should be FOIPable and we should have access to. They took my money. I never got the information. And this was 2019, 2020, maybe, before Danielle became premier. And I raised a stink about it. I got a refund, but I still never got the money or got the information. So they started already holding back information quite some time ago. Also, I've written numerous letters. So being an ex-Government of Alberta employee, I know that they have a system. It's called the Action Request Tracking System. So if you write a letter to the ministry and to a minister, it actually triggers a response timeline, right? So the letter gets received, it gets logged into this system, this Action Request Tracking System. They give it a rating of importance, right? So if it's really critical and very controversial, say, they want to get a quick turnaround. It gets assigned to Government of Alberta staffers. The staffers write the response. Then they log that response back into the system, and then it makes it back to the ministry. The ministry will then review the response. So that's the minister's office. The staffers write it. The minister's office reviews the letter, and they accept it or they send it back to you to add more or to edit or whatever. So I have been writing letters to this government since Danielle Smith was elected. Actually, since Kenney was elected, even. And during the Jason Kenney days, I was getting responses. But since Ms. Smith is the premier, it's months. Like I wrote to them in March about one matter. And finally, I got a response in September. But I only got the response after I went to the constituency office for my MLA. Actually, he's not even my MLA. It's Minister Rick Wilson, who's the Minister of Indigenous Relations, and he lives in Wetaskiwin, or his constituency office is in Wetaskiwin, which is close to me. So that was the only reason they responded, because I actually went there and physically said, like, I've been waiting for a response from you for months. And I know, and I also said, I have knowledge of the Action Request Tracking System and what that meant, how it's mandated. So there's a certain time frame that they're supposed to respond to letters, and they're not meeting it. And then I don't know if any of you follow Dr. Angela Grace, and her and I were chatting on DMs too, and she was trying to get some information from them. And that's how her and I started talking, because I commented on one of her videos and said, well, good luck, because I noticed they're not responding to letters from anyone. And when they do, it's real. Like I finally did get a response. It was a paragraph, if that. They basically brushed me off. Anyways.
So Friends of the Athabasca seem like they're a good organization for water protection in Alberta.
Yeah, and Keepers of the Water too.
Yeah. Athabasca, that's what Athabasca, yeah.
So, and those, like, but in all of those are non-government organizations, so they refer to them as NGOs. They are great organizations for us as Indigenous people and rights holders. All of us are rights holders. We're not stakeholders. And that is a very different place to be as a rights holder. So I really enjoy being part of these non-government organizations when I can, like Keepers and the Friends of the Athabasca, because it's a good place to go have your voice heard. They start petitions, they start movements and things like that. Like Perry and I, my husband, we went to a coal protest a few weeks back now, and CPAWS had organized it. So that's the Canadian Protected Areas and Wilderness, I think, is the association. And anyways, Keepers of the Water was there too. And they had their land back flags, and they got up and spoke a little bit about, just the water circumstances and the situation around water. It seems like we're going to talk about water tonight, which is funny because my husband was like, you should talk about water tonight.
Mm-hmm. Water is life.
Right? And here we are talking about water. And you're so right. And here's another thing that I've just been really grappling with. I've been working on a major reclamation project with a big oil and gas company here in central Alberta. So it's a big field that they're reclaiming on First Nation lands. So I'm a contractor to this company. I'm not going to say who, but through this process of remediating and reclaiming these well sites, started having some conversations about the soils, right? Because if when we encounter the contaminated soils, they go to landfill. So there's two options. You can either landfill them or you can land treat them. So that means turning the soils, allowing them exposure to the sun and to the air, and get the proper microbial balance happening so that those microbes will consume the hydrocarbons. But Alberta, I've learned in this process, Alberta and Saskatchewan, I think, are the only two provinces, and maybe even Saskatchewan might not be right, but Alberta for sure, only province that allows landfilling of soils. And we are running out of soil. We can't find clean soil to fill these well sites now. We're struggling to find clean soils because Alberta has just been willy-nilly landfilling contaminated soil. So that means these soils are gone forever, and soil is life too. We don't have the vegetation that we need to support us and to support the wildlife that we consume, or also to add to the proper nutrient loads and rivers and streams and things if we don't have healthy soils. So not only is water life, but soil is life too. And this is quite concerning to me, that just the level at which Alberta has mismanaged resources is alarming to me. It's just so alarming.
I mean, in my opinion, if you are, and I know that this might not go over some people like and agree, but I feel like if you are the Minister of Environment Protections or whatever, you should have knowledge on protecting the environment and how everything gets impacted. For example, because we are talking about environment. Um,
Absolutely.
and this is where I get so annoyed because like what I study is criminology. I have to go back to school. Anyway, and it's so funny to me to have like especially for example, Cheeto talk about crime and I'm like this man has no idea how crime works. And the same with Pierre, like they don't understand these things. And that's where I keep going back to the argument that whoever is making decisions about that should have education in that field. That's my little rant.
I'm with you. And you know what else you have to, I wonder, and like, do they care? Does the Cheeto Man and PP, do they really care about criminals and the people? Because people aren't criminals normally because that's just what they grew up wanting to be. It's usually because of life circumstances. It's usually because you struggled or had some form of trauma or neglect in your life, and or some form of hardship that has forced you into that type of lifestyle, and they just treat them like they're things, right? Like, it's
Well,
really
yeah,
alarming.
like that's something I've really noticed. And not to make this racial, but like I'm making it racial. This isn't hate on white people, by the way. As a full disclaimer, it is how when I was placed in white homes is how dehumanizing it was that they just didn't see us as human beings. And that might just be because I was a foster kid, but like I know that my race had a lot to do with it as well.
you, Thank you for sharing that, CB, and I'm really sorry that you had to experience that. And it makes me wonder how many young children, Indigenous children that are in the foster system, feel that too. So that it just speaks to me that the goal of residential schools, the goal of all of that colonial policy that started with Sir John A. Macdonald, was to because they didn't see us as human, and because they wanted to take away, I think I would argue, what they feared. And what they feared was our ability for survival, our knowledge, our intimate knowledge of these lands, and they wanted to control that. And it's sad because this dehumanization is of children through this foster system is just continued. um Approach, it's a different approach but same outcome. It's really, I'm so sad to hear that that's how you felt.
I want to add to that. Okay, so it actually started with white people and their becoming white people. I know that sounded weird, but I'm going to explain. Okay, white people is a social construct that they obviously benefit from, but they didn't. I'm pretty sure the term white people didn't exist until like the 1700s, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that, but. Um, in order, like, they started their own residential schools for their kids. They were the ones who went through it first, which is how they were so, I mean, I theorize how they were easily so, it was so easy for them to dehumanize others,
Yeah.
right? Because when you go through that stuff as a kid, it changes things. And, that speaks to their dehumanization along with, obviously, like, the amount of alcoholism that they do like have. It's not me being prejudiced, by the way. Um, but when you like this is all intentional. They wanted to do this to us. Like they actually like did the math in the book How to Build an Empire. They talk about how they did the math in order to figure out how many children you needed to have to overpopulate us to steal our land. This was an ongoing plan for many, many, many years, if not hundreds of years. And when we're talking about the dehumanization of us, it's also to steal our land and resources, right? Because it goes hand in hand with the doctrine of discovery. I
Yep.
was looking for the taco kid. Okay, I'm done my moment for a second. I'm in the
Okay.
middle of making dinner.
Okay. But I agree. When you think about, so 1492 was when Mr. Columbus discovered the land. That's so crazy. Just even gross to say it. But okay, 1492 was when the folks from Europe found that there was more land over here. And it really was like, so we know when the treaties were signed was in the 1800s. There were some, I think the East Coast, like Eastern Canada, eastern part of Turtle Island, there were peace and friendship treaties and the wampum belt and stuff that go further back than that. But I think I've thought about this gap of time that happens. See, we hear the stories about the explorers, like even like Anthony Henday. Let's use him for an example. How he used Huron um, scouts. He brought them with him when he came west, and some of them, the descendants of some of those scouts, actually were found, they're around here. And like one of the nations that I've worked closely with, Kelly Lake Cree Nation, their ancestry is tied to them, to those scouts, but they're Cree also. So they have some of those scouts that came with Henday actually married into Cree folks around the Jasper area. So there was obviously a relationship of mutual benefit in the beginning, because there's a couple hundred years where the people were just starting to arrive, and they were obviously learning from our people, and our people were obviously being kind and caring for them and helping them learn their way and survive in our climate and our environment. And then it's like from the mid 1800s onward, it was just all of a sudden this big scheme started, and how are we going to get rid of these people that's and obviously we have to acknowledge that there were some of the European folks that came over here that respected us, enjoyed our company, our culture, our way of life, because from those Scottish folks came marrying with Cree women came the Métis and their culture. And they know that culture formed before Canada was a country. And they had shared um, cultural aspects. Like, you know, I identify as both, but I've actually learned more about my indigeneity as a First Nation person than as a Métis. Even though my dad and his family really are strong Métis, but my dad kind of moved away from his cultural identity, so I've found myself through my work. But anyway, side note from that is like, but what I understand from the Métis culture is even their dance, like the jig is a kind of a marriage of powwow and the Scottish Highland dancing. But so like obviously the relationship was good at one point, and then they started to recognize the resources and the wealth, and the greed motivated them. That's my take, anyways. I don't know how you feel about it, ZB or Curtis, if you want to chime in.
Um, Sorry, Curtis.
Okay.
Whoever wants to go.
Yeah, that's a lot. We did the whole history. Our whole history.
Real condensed version.
That's pretty good. Yeah, a lot did happen back then, and yeah, you were gonna mention about the liberal election. What was that all about?
Okay. Well, ZB, did you want to add anything more about the newcomers and the relationship? And then if not, we can move on to that liberal debate.
I wanted to add that like just in how like the doctrine is worded about us, that they never actually saw us as humans.
Yeah.
Like they were like there's a lot of stuff that we actually don't know. And even though like this is my like passion and what I study in my extracurricular time, I know for a solid fact that there's a bunch of stuff that we don't know because it wasn't all buddy buddy.
Yeah.
And I know that due to like the like in Newfoundland they still have this on the books is that you can get money for scalps,
Yeah.
right? So it wasn't all buddy buddy like
No,
how we really try to frame it.
you're right. You're right. I think I'm always looking for the
The
positives.
the positive, right? Because it
Yeah.
if you focus on the negative, it's just gonna it makes you hella resentful of where our people are and how we are treated, right?
You can say that again.
And that's something like I mean, even talking about like what I've been going through personally, knowing how much my cookum hated white people, I'm like, I don't want to be that type of person
Yeah.
who just harbors that kind of animosity towards people.
And yeah, I'm with you. Plus, I have white family, right? Like my mom is non-indigenous, and one story I like to share about my non-indigenous side of my family is my grandfather. He actually had to flee from Odessa, but back then it was still in USSR. His father, my great grandfather, was shot and killed by the Bolsheviks and left in the streets of Odessa. And my great grandmother was not, they wouldn't let her remove his body from the streets or anything. So she had to pack up. I think she had 8 kids, if I remember correctly, and leave there and flee across Europe. She had to leave, I think, 2 or 3 children she left behind, and then go across the ocean, come to Canada, and make her way to southern Saskatchewan. And my grandfather, I think he was 13 years old when all of this happened. So as he got to be an adult, he um, he became a landowner and a farmer. And I know for a fact that my grandfather had no clue about what happened to our people. And my mom, she shows up in her little small town in southern Saskatchewan with this Nietzsche, right? That nobody's ever seen a Nietzsche in town before. So that was kind of interesting. But my grandparents were really open to that. Like they didn't judge. And I know how my grandfather was. He loved his farm. He would walk his land before he would cut hay to make sure there was no ducks nesting in the hayfield or no deer with like hiding their fawns, because he would, he broke his heart if any wildlife came to harm or anything. So I know how he felt about his land and how grateful he was that he was given a place, had that opportunity to have that farm after what he experienced fleeing from Odessa. But he had no clue that it was on the backs of our ancestors. Like, he just didn't know. And I don't think my aunts and uncles really didn't know much either until the truth and reconciliation stuff started happening, and that we started all learning. Like, there's a lot of our story I didn't know, and I'm still learning about it. And it's awful some days. It's kind of shocking to learn these things, and watching some of the movies that are being made now, and it's really sad. But anyways, I feel like we're a little bit all over the map. So, but which is our way. So those that are in the room, like, sometimes when we're having conversation as Indigenous people, we always need to tell that little side story to get to the point of what we were making sometimes. And it'll take, we're good storytellers. So we don't just have a conversation and get to the point right away all the time. We got to tell the side stories to get to that point. So if we seem like we're rambling, bear with us, because we do usually get to our point. But back to the debate. So the debate was last week. Interesting. It was a pretty good debate, actually. I was moved. I was moved to tears, but glaring omission. There wasn't a lot of talk about Indigenous and matters or Indigenous rights or reconciliation until the end. And I'm going to read to you. So APTN, they posted an article following. So this one is dated February 26, 2025. And the title of the article is "The Liberal Leadership Debate Ignores Indigenous Issues." So they just opened up talking about, like, most of the conversation was around trade threats, inflation, the high cost of living, and who will be the best opponent for to beat Pierre Poilievre. That was pretty much what everybody was focused on. And then, so they go on to say, one glaring omission stood out: Indigenous issues and reconciliation. In the 2-hour debate, Indigenous peoples were only mentioned twice in 2 hours, with the sound bites lasting a total of 90 seconds. Before I go on, what that tells me, though, is that they know we're not watching. They know we're not actively voting in the numbers that we could be. And so they focus their energy on the non-Indigenous Canadians and leave us out of the conversation, as they always have. And I'm really hoping that through this community that we're building here, and as we're moving on and we're going to be facing a federal election, that we can maybe help change that a little bit. If we influence a handful of people each, then maybe we can change that conversation, and they'll start seeing us as priorities when they're having these discussions in the future, because that's shameful. Out of a 2-hour debate, we were mentioned twice for 90 seconds. But I want to read you what it says for the rest of it here. So Freeland noted that Indigenous participation in energy projects was a really positive story. And she mentioned that as finance minister, she had created a $5 billion Indigenous loan guarantee program. And I heard her say this and how proud she was of this. And it's great. I don't disagree. But I feel that it's still just a new form of colonization. Just this time they're getting us to the table, and we're basically, in a way, kind of colonizing ourselves when it's still in their processes, right? When we have to follow through their gates, like the environmental impact assessments and all of those things are led by them. We're following their ways and their systemic systems that they've built without our influence. We didn't influence these systems. And so they're still trying to bring us into those systems. And now they're luring us with the opportunity of equity, revenue sharing, training, jobs, and contracts, which are great. We need those things, but we need to be part of the conversation about how we get to those things. And they're still trying to tell us how to get there. Okay, then Freeland noted that Indigenous participation in energy projects was a really positive story. Oh, sorry, I already read that part. And then she goes on to say, we're a country whose path to reconciliation can include Indigenous people in Canada being partners in building the energy security we need today more than ever. And then Karina Gould chimed in, and I was really impressed. This was the one comment that made me feel a little happier. Gould responded that Indigenous reconciliation is about more than a relationship with natural resources. And that's the truth. Like, this is what I've heard from Pierre Polyev. Now, this is what I heard from Freeland, even. And, I've said it before, I am a liberal. I'm a liberal by choice because I can come to that table and have a little say in policy and things like that. But I was disappointed when that was the only way that she brought up reconciliation was the economic reconciliation, and it's all about access to resources. And then Karina Gould chimed in and said that there's more to this relationship than that. So I was really pleased to see that. Mr. Bayless, he did not say anything about Indigenous issues or Indigenous rights or reconciliation, and neither did Mark Carney. And I'm a little bit disappointed in Mr. Carney. I do feel like sometimes he's trying to speak to those more kind of conservative light, they're calling them, the liberals that lean a little further right than the ones that lean further left, because they're the ones who are on the fence, right? They still might vote for Polyev. So I really feel like it was, strategically, that's where that all of them are really focusing their efforts. But it was only Freeland and Gould that said anything about Indigenous issues. So I'll share some more about what Mr. Bayless said about there. I thought was really interesting, but please, I want anyone who wants to chime in. And if there's anyone in the room that wants to come up, you're more than welcome to join the conversation. But Curtis, what do you think of what I just read to you?
I have thoughts. If
Oh,
Curtis
okay.
does a
Yeah, Curtis paused. So, go ahead, Zeba.
when it sorry, Curtis, do you want to? Because I'm going to go on a little rant. So
Go ahead, rant away.
okay, here's the thing I really dislike about the resources. We are, in fact, the resource. The amount of money that Canada gets and pushes into the economy based on our people alone is staggering because we are the ones that overrepresent every single system out there. We are a cash grab for them. That's why they don't want to help us, in my humble opinion. Because when you don't help us, guess what? You get to steal more land from us. And I know that that was mean and blunt, but that is how I feel. And that is when you start putting the information and the data in a streamline together, that's what the evidence also supports.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I was talking about being a kid in care. Like, the overwhelming stats, and every psychologist, psychiatrist will tell you that I should be dead because of the life expectancy of a kid in care like me. I wasn't supposed to live to 30. Our people are the ones who are dying out on the streets due to extracurricular activities. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the word because I
I know what you
don't want it
mean.
to get flagged.
Yeah.
Um, and that comes from residential school. And even the government has admitted to we overrepresent the system in every way possible because of residential schools, because of day schools. And to say that our only economic factor to the country is through resource relations. No, ma'am, we are the resource. Like, for every child that they take and put in care is money that they're going to put into addictions, that like the correction facility, and it all goes hand in hand. Like, your chances of graduating, I forget the stat, but it's not good once you leave your original home.
Yeah.
That's my little rant.
You're right. I can't argue with that at all. It's a shame. And we're overrepresented in the penal system. We're overrepresented in the MMIW. Like, our women are going missing more than non-Indigenous women. We are overrepresented when it comes to our interactions, even just with police, our children being in care. our addictions and substance abuses, and this all, you're right, is contributing to economy, because it's mostly non-Indigenous people too that work in those systems once we get into those institutions. So they're making a living and going off and spending their money, plus the ones that we, the folks in our communities that are maybe a little better off, that are a little more thriving than some of ours, the ones that have managed to make it through post-secondary and find themselves, a meaningful career, or they even have a full-time job working in the band office, whatever. The income that they make is not spent in their First Nation, right? We spend our money in towns and cities nearby because there's no services for us in our communities. So even that, we're contributing to an economy that's been set up on stolen lands and resources, and on basically on our backs. So I can't disagree with you. we are a form of resource too. You're right. Didn't really think of it that way before, ZB, but thank you. Curtis.
My grandpa used to say, "We're Indians, like we're big business for them. They make a lot of money off of us, eh? We employ social workers, cops. They'd all be out of a job without us. Like, and they made the system where they're thriving off of us. Like they're all creating this economy and they're living like off our resources. Like stealing our resources is what drives this country. Like trillions of dollars are taken out of our lands, literally trillions every year, and God knows how many years. Like people always say, "Oh, we should be the Saudis of like the North," but we're not. Like it just there's something that needs to change in this country. And I always think every election, I'm always hopeful that things will change. We always hear the promises of the white man. The fork-tongued white man comes and says, "Oh, vote for me, and things will be better." We've heard it from everyone. Every government has told us that, and they said, "Oh, we'll promise we'll give you clean drinking water this time. Oh, we'll promise we'll do this for you," and nothing, eh? So we've heard it so many times, eh? And now a new leader is coming and saying, "Oh, vote for me, and we'll give you tax revenue resource sharing." So that's a new promise.
Yeah, it's a big promise. And it's even happened here in Alberta. In Alberta, Jason Kenney, when he came in, they formed an organization here called the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation. And they too, they have guaranteed loans. And what these guaranteed loans were set up to do were to, any First Nation in Alberta could apply for a loan to start up a business or to buy into businesses. But guess what? It was only oil and gas or forestry. There were two sectors, and that was the only two sectors they came to the table with. So I remember, because I was working for First Nation at the time, and when they came to meet with me, I was like, this is just colonization. Because if you really wanted to sincerely encourage First Nations and Métis to participate in the economy of this province, it should be on our terms. We should be able to choose what sector we want. Maybe it's tourism, maybe it's agriculture, or whatever it might be. It could be anything, fishing, but trapping, things that are important to us, but that wasn't on the list. So they've expanded it now. Like there was some pushback, quite a bit of pushback from First Nations in Alberta. So they have expanded it to include agriculture and tourism, but I've yet to see them fund an agriculture or tourism opportunity. Maybe it's happened. I haven't looked at it for a little bit, but I haven't heard any announcements. And what happened, I found one thing that was really interesting. I think there was 5 First Nations around the Slave Lake area. So you could probably guess which ones. And they were given an opportunity to buy into Tamarack Resources. So Tamarack has the oil and gas field, the mineral rights up around that Slave Lake area. But Tamarack has been developing those resources for decades already. So they're ready to put that oil and gas field, to bed. And what I was concerned about is, how is Alberta protecting the interests of the First Nations that have bought into this from being left with the reclamation costs? What's stopping Tamarack from folding like every other company and leaving them holding the bag for the cost for reclaiming and remediating and reclaiming these sites, which can be very costly. Anyways, that was my rant. Hello, Lisa Dawn. What would you like to add to the conversation?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm really enjoying this discussion tonight. One common thread that I'm finding is a lot of what you're talking about revolves around health outcomes, which is one of my special interests, as ZB says. But specifically, Curtis mentioned something that rang a little bell in my brain. And I was thinking, I read or I saw a headline that mentioned that PP had made comments about industry dollars going direct to First Nations, something about like industry tax dollars going straight to First Nations.
Yep.
And I just wondered if you knew about that and could talk about that a bit.
Thank you. Yes, I did hear this, and I'm pretty sure I'll look it up, but I'm pretty sure the quote was that corporate taxes realized from some of these resource developments will be shared with First Nations, so First Nations can buy their own drinking water. That was the quote. Something not exactly verbatim. So that's just to me a real kick in the butt because, excuse me, sir, it was the never given up. That water it should never be for sale. Number one, like why would we have to buy water back? And we never gave that up. We didn't give any of these resources up. And when you talk to folks that are west of Manitoba, where the number treaty started, a lot of folks will maintain that it was the depth of a plow that was agreed to for sharing. That means oil and gas, which are way deeper than a plow, weren't included in that sharing agreement, which we call a treaty. And so that's interesting. But thank you, Lisa, for bringing that up. I'm gonna, if someone else wants to chime in on that, I'll look up the exact quote.
The 1930 Transfer Act with Canada gave all the resources to Alberta. That's another thing that violates the treaty because our treaties existed before the province of Alberta. Now the province of Alberta has supposedly taken all our mineral rights of oil and gas and everything in the province. That's how they become trillionaires and have surpluses of billions, you know?
You're so right. That I feel like that was one of the biggest tricks and lies they ever played on us. So they signed the treaties with us. So in Treaty 6, 1876, Treaty 7, 1877, and Treaty 8 was 1878, I'm pretty sure. Is that correct? Those are, I think.
That's when they first started signing them. But the
Yeah.
number of treaties actually go up to a certain year,
Right.
depending on where you are. And I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure the cutoff was like 1970s.
Okay. So, but back in those those 1800 ones, when they were signing, I'm thinking about, so the Natural Resources Transfer Act applies to primarily the prairie provinces, so Manitoba westward, and BC wasn't yet established, I don't believe. So they signed treaties with us with this really great intent that I'm pretty sure our ancestors, obviously, I think there was some mistrust, rightfully so, but they must have felt to some point that they were feeling like they were at a point where they could agree, or that they wouldn't have signed off. We can talk all about interpreters, and maybe they didn't understand fully what they were signing. But everybody I've talked to that's an elder and has had elders in their lives from back into all the way back to the late 1800s, they say that it was the depth of a plow. So they signed those treaties. Then they established the reserve system because the Indian Act was written shortly right there in 1876 as well. Or 1867, sorry, established the reserves, put us on the reserves with this whole, these are going to be your lands, but we can still share this. Then, and I've done some research into the NRTA. So it was Alberta and Saskatchewan that were feeling like they were left out of Confederation, and that the national interest was taking a priority over the provincial interests. Sound familiar? It's still the same way. Anyways, so to appease them, Canada agreed to write the natural resources transfer agreements. And that's what gave them the authority over the resources and then the crown lands. And then section 12 of the NRTA is the provincial obligation to ensure that First Nations, or the Indians, it says, right, have access to the Crown lands for subsistence. And they've narrowed this subsistence down, though, to hunting, fishing, and trapping. I will always maintain and argue. So Alberta tries very hard to focus on the hunting, fishing, trapping. They don't want to think about anything else that we might do on the land. But I've always maintained to them that we do not do any of those things without ceremony. So you can't exclude ceremony. Plus, we need water to subsist. But anyway, so the big lie they did to us.
Pause
Sorry.
really quickly. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Nerdy. Nerdy would like to speak, and I believe
sorry.
Nerdy's been chilling for a while. So sorry to cut you off. Nerdy, the floor is yours.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I wanted to do just a quick little announcement, and I wanted to help you with your 2 tech things that you wanted to help with. And then I was gonna bounce just so we could bring up another Indigenous voice into my box. So
Okay.
okay. So on the bottom of your screen, on the right-hand side,
Yes.
right next to the arrow, the share arrow, there should be 3 dots, right?
There is.
Okay, hit that 3 dots.
Okay.
Okay. On that list that comes up there,
Yes.
what do you have on that list there?
Live gifts, flip camera.
Okay. Yeah, so scroll down a little bit, and there should be a little thing that says mute, and there's a little slider on there.
Okay, mute microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you mute that right now,
Okay.
and then get rid of that, like just touch the screen somewhere up top. Now it's at the bottom already, and you can just turn it back on.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's your mute. The other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to fix your panel, because right now you can't, your background is cut off. So if you hit the people on the left-hand side.
The people.
Yep, the pink and blue person on the bottom left-hand side.
Okay.
And then hit the little cog, the little wheel cog thing on the top there. Okay. And then go to fixed panel, which is right next to your fixed grid that you're already on.
Oh. Thank you.
And then you can change it. If you go back into that setting, you can change it to a 4.
Okay.
Instead of, so go hit the people again, then hit the wheel.
Okay.
And then hit the 4 underneath there instead of the 6. And then it gives you your 4 that you like. Because I know this is the setup that you like doing. So
yeah, thank you.
Perfect. And the only other thing I wanted to say was fantastic on the shares, guys. We're at 229 shares. That's fabulous.
Nice.
If we could get the live up to 20K likes, that'd be fantastic. Tapping is clapping, and it is free to do. Perfect. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Nerdy. Sorry to make you wait.
That's okay. I was enjoying listening to the conversation and everything, and I was absorbing the information while you were talking.
Yes, and mine too. Lisa said she admires your patience. So do I. I'm sorry. I'm really bad at seeing the comments.
I'm clipping videos at the same time, so it's all good.
And Perry even came in and wrote me a note and said you wanted
It's okay. I even texted you too.
I ignored him, Jim. All right. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
She's in the zone.
I know. I'm just kidding. I'm hyper focused. Anyways. Okay. Thank you very much for the tech support, because I need it, as Lisa can attest. Anyway, back to the NRTA and the big lie, because I feel like, we believe that the treaties were good. We were going to share these resources and this land. And I think our ancestors probably saw, like, we can't fight these people that are coming. They have weapons, and there's many of them, and they just keep coming, and they're also devious. So then when they established the NRTA is when it really kind of went south for us, because then it was not long after that they also implemented the pass system. So what's the point of having a piece of legislation that says that the provinces are obligated to make sure we have access to these crown lands, but then they put us on the reserve and don't let us leave without permission? So we couldn't access those crown lands anymore. And Alberta hangs their hat on this. They will push back on, if you're not currently using the land, you're not using the land. Therefore, it's not your right to use it right now. You have to prove that you're using it currently. So it's a current use kind of approach that they take. I always argue that we have the right. I did a video on this and a colleague of mine who's passed away now, but he came up with this analogy that if you own a vintage car and you have it parked in your garage for a year or 5 years or whatever, because say you just haven't had the chance to drive it for whatever reason, you still have the right to drive that car. And so why is it that just because we're not out there on every piece of crown land practicing our rights, the government of Alberta tries to tell us if we're it's a use it or lose it kind of right, which that's not what the Constitution says, and that's not what any duty to consult court cases ever said. But that's what they hang their hat on. Anyways, I feel like we've kind of gone in a little bit of circles, but we were talking about Polyev and what he said about us being able to buy our water back. That's kind of what took us to this conversation. Anyone else want to add to that? We're good.
I have very strong feelings about the amount of power that the provinces have, I guess. I mean, in all realms of treaty, when it comes to our health rights, to our land rights, because really the province has so much power in a lot of these realms, but we're outside their jurisdiction. And right now, as I mentioned, I've got a special interest in Indigenous health, and I'm really looking at the history of Indigenous health and how strongly linked it is to politics. You know, a lot of people think that the NIHB benefits, the non-insured health benefits program that's offered to status and Inuit individuals are a treaty right, but in the government's eyes, they are not. And historically, they're actually linked to politics, to political big moves. And so I think, you know, when we're thinking about how to get our people out to vote, knowing that, yeah, we believe in our treaty rights, but in the government's eyes, some of these things are not enshrined in treaty. And so some of them are political outcomes and are directly linked to specific political parties. And so we can sit here and say like, oh, our rights will go on regardless of what party's in power. But I think someone in this live last week said, it's about talking about who we're going to be negotiating with, who we're sitting across the table from, and if they're reasonable and how they see it, right? And so I think as much as we do have rights, it still matters what political party is in power because, you know, provincially and federally, look at how much power is in that government's hands.
Absolutely. And you know, it's interesting that you bring up the health conversation. Perry and I went to, there was a local gathering here for the NDP on Saturday. So we went out and joined the conversation. And there were two MLAs that were there. And the one MLA, her name was Heather Sweet. She came up and she was telling us that because the Alberta budget was just released last week, Alberta has cut the Indigenous health spend by a third. Like, our people's health is already like undercared for and neglected, and so how can we cut that spend by a third? We're the probably the least healthy population, sadly, in Alberta. Anyway, so welcome, small boy Marie. Nice to see you, my friend.
Alright, tanto ya.
Menando, Kiamaga.
Oh, hanging in there.
Me too.
Riding this out.
Yeah, I'm feeling all kinds of feelings, being scared and angry and just numb. Yeah, anyways. But
Yeah.
what would you like to add to the conversation this evening?
Well, I was looking at watching I don't know if it's a Facebook post or a TikTok post where Trudeau has gone running to King Charles now to try and resolve the mess that he's created, I think, with declaring sovereignty and doing what he wants with our resources, like cutting deals. And he's being reminded that he doesn't have that full authority because everything that they do depends on our treaty. Our treaty governs the relationship between our people and the colonial beings. So King Charles knows what's up. King Charles knows what the hell went down when Canada assumed jurisdiction over us as human beings and over our motherland. He knew. He knows. and Queen Elizabeth knew as well. So there's um, for these premiers and Justin Trudeau to be flexing, and Mr. Polivier making all this noise about, half-assed promises about us paying for our own water with resources that they're going to take and give us a cut out of. I mean, that's ludicrous. With what we know, what's coming down for them as Indigenous peoples, as treaty peoples, we're okay. We're going to be okay. We know how to survive on our motherland, and our motherland will take care of us. But the colonial being is why do you think there's all these earthquakes? Why do you think the fires? Why do you think the water moves? It's us making that happen because we are a part of water. We are a part of the fire and the wind, and we're part of our motherland. And so the shaking and is trying to shake these colonial beings into shake some sense into them, but they're not listening. They're still going to keep digging. They're still going to keep cutting deals, even though they know the land's not theirs. They're going to keep cutting deals. And when shit hits the fan, guess who's going to come running to us and say, can you show us how to grow potatoes? Or, something like that. Or, how to make an arrow to kill some. That's where we're going. That's the direction we are going as a people, as treaty people.
I totally agree with you. And it's funny there's a couple things I wanted to add to. So Lisa Dawn up above you there, she's my little girl. She's an adult now. But when she first left home and we weren't living together anymore, one thing I did always share with her, if something ever were to happen, and you can't get to me or I can't get to you, make your way to a First Nation somewhere. People know me, and our people know how to survive and find. So it's funny. It's interesting that you bring that up because it's the truth. We'll be the ones who survive whatever's coming our way. And also with regards to what you said about treaty, and it's those treaties that bind us to King Charles and the British Crown. Perry and I we had a busy week of politics last week. We went, our MP, just like yours, is Mike Lake, right? He's the Conservative Member of Parliament for Wetaskiwin County in the Edmonton-Wetaskiwin riding.
Yeah.
So he had a roundtable meeting on Thursday night, and we decided to go because we just thought we got to hear what's going on. Like, this is our representative, so we wanted to be part of the conversation. And I brought that up because everybody around that table was saying they were scared about sovereignty, right? And having Trump talking about 51st states and annexing us and all that kind of conversation. So I reminded that MP, I said, you need to remember and recall and remind your colleagues and the leader of your party that we have treaties on these lands. And these treaties are with that British Crown. And that treaty is going to protect our sovereignty, but also Canada's.
Yeah.
And it was funny how many people approached me at the end of the meeting and were like, I never knew these things. And this lady was like, I learned so much from you tonight. And it's shocking.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I mean, if we don't keep educating the first immigrants and the new immigrants, about our true history, our true treaty history, and the treaty relationship that exists between, even with the new immigrants, if they swear allegiance to Canada, they swear allegiance to that treaty as well, because of that relationship we have with the Imperial Crown.
Yeah, 100%. I actually kind of had a heated discussion on another Beaver Politics Live a couple days ago with this fella who was like, could not wrap his head around that he too was a treaty partner. He's like, I don't get treaty benefits. I'm like, well, your benefit was access to these lands. Your benefit was the lifestyle that you live today, that you actually have a job and homes, the infrastructure that you rely on. That's your benefit to these treaties. And he wouldn't agree and couldn't see it. But you know what? We can't reach everybody.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see how many folks have no clue about the treaty relationship that exists for all of us on these lands. And I think about these newcomers too, like you're saying, you know how many of them I've run into that are taught right away to be racist towards us?
Oh, yeah.
It's really sad.
Yeah.
Anyway, ZB
True.
or Curtis, do any of you, either of you want to add to the conversation?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, ZB.
Okay. So, in regards to our health, my actual special interest is trauma because trauma is the key. And once we understand how to heal from that, that actually impacts our health outcomes of life. So, if health is your special interest, go to trauma because there's so many things that actually happen to our bodies as a result of trauma. Like, for example, the reason why diabetes overrepresents our people so much is because of the trauma from residential schools and how they were serving us in collaboration with the mass attempted extinction of the buffalo.
Mm-hmm. Our,
Like that goes hand in hand with how we are overrepresented in diabetes. But I'm gonna throw out a couple book titles for you. I'll put them in the comments. Um, but really this comes down to our children who are our most valuable resource out there. And I don't like saying children are a resource, but they really are. Is making sure that we provide them with as much as we can be a healed adult when we are raising these beautiful little babies. Because I like to have hope that it will not take 7 generations to eradicate the trauma out of our bloodlines. um, but
they're
with that being said,
magical.
like I think that is where we need to focus on is rebuilding our relationships with children within our communities, not just our children, but all children within our communities. Because
Yeah.
when we do that, we also we go after the foundation that is colonization. Community is resistance. It, I, like I said, trauma is most definitely my fucking special interest, but it's also because of the fact that that is when you understand that, you understand the politics, the like um the resurgence of our culture, the resistance within our bloodlines. This is all part of who we are as people. Anyway, that's my little tirade. Sorry.
Yeah. When our ancestors, uh, one of the challenges that I want to put out there to these so-called treaty representatives with the crown, even though we know they're Indian Act chiefs, but uh, how many of them can translate the colonial wordsmith text of the treaty to our language? How many? Because I've taken a few words out of that treaty, like education. Is that even in the schoolhouse? Is what they promised. That's education. Because uh, means the house of learning, and our house of learning are in the lodges. That's where we heal ourselves. And the other one is they used medicine chest. Us we say maskiwat, which is maskikiwat, which is medicine bag, and our medicine bags are full of herbs and spices and roots and all kinds of stuff that heal us naturally. And that is something that when they claim medicines, the treaty right to health care, I would contend to say that it's our own medicines, to be able to pick our own natural medicines without relying on the big pharma, because big pharma keeps us sick, right? And if we have are we're not we're there's very few. There's more now coming up, but there's very few of the true medicine people that know the roots, the natural stuff that can heal our bodies with natural um, cleansing of the body, natural things that will fix the various organs. We have that. We have those medicines, but because we have, as a people, we've been conditioned to believe that everything white is right. So we set the colonial version up before ours. We don't believe in our own version of the treaty. We don't believe in our own medicines. We would rather put more faith in the YT healthcare systems when we know darn well there's a lot of that we have to gut out our treaty on our terms, how we understood that treaty. And that you don't learn that in any school. You learn that going through ceremony, you learn that going through growing up with old people, and it's in the language. Do you ever get one of those indoctrinated treaty chiefs to tell you to reinterpret how they arrived at dominion over all that's alive? That's a biblical understanding of what the world. And for us to put that aside and say, well, I'll go just to get my cows and plows. I'm going to believe in I'm going to, I'm okay with the colonial version of the treaty. When she spoke about that, the depth of the plow, our ancestors they were brilliant, and they didn't come to the depth of the plow on their own accord. They prayed hard, and that's what they were told to use as a symbol for the sharing of the land. And that means for agricultural purposes only, not anything, not the mountains, not underneath. And it they did it. They put that there for two reasons. One was to maintain peace, so nobody's claiming more land than the other ones. That's to maintain peaceful coexistence. And the other reason for the depth of the plow is to protect our motherland, to protect her from what they eventually did anyway, because they did not believe in the paramountcy of the sanctity of all life. That's what our treaty is about. That's the basis on which that's the fundamental doctrine, the fundamental principle upon which our treaty is based. Because at the time, all languages carried the same thought processes, all languages across Turtle Island before the Monio came. And they all had that fundamental belief and valued life, the value of life, the paramountcy of all, sanctity of all life. That's the reason why the depth of the plow was put there as a symbol, because they knew the Monio, they knew the conniving, deceitful words. That's why they called the English language forked tongue.
Oh, nice.
Dominion over paramountcy, that it conflicts. It's contrary. Dominion is contrary to paramountcy of the sanctity of all life. That's where the difference is.
Thank you. I really appreciate your wise words and everything you share with us, Marie. ZB, you wanted to add to the conversation?
Okay, a quick note. I forget who was talking about this, but I need to blurt this out before I forget it. When we talk about politics and our representation, when it comes to helping our people, you need to be looking at who's promising to research. Because research is how we get grants and money to help our people. So you really need to be paying attention to research as a subject for who's, or like a political standpoint of whether or not they actually believe in the word research. Because that is how we create money and funding for our communities. Not that they'll ever give us enough, because again, it benefits them. And there was something that Elder Marie was saying, and now I can't remember what I was going to add to what she was saying, but it is in the language, and it is most definitely. I find it in how like even language keepers talk to me. They talk to me vastly different than non-language keepers.
Yeah.
It's built into you socially.
Yeah. It's our humanity is encoded into our language. It's codified in our language, our humanity. When they translate from English, no, the dictionaries that the one that's online, when they translate the Cree terms, they translate it to into a colonial context. But as people, as fluent speakers, or even the linguistics, they don't break down the words. They do it by in inanimate, animate, first pronoun, whatever. I don't know how these linguists put or try to understand our language, but as a fluent speaker, I can break down words to their original. Like many of our words contain the root word mete, which is heart. So, like I said, tante tutin, that means where are you taking your heart? You know, where are you going? Tante witutin, where are you taking your heart? That's how sacred our language is, and it's a very kind and soft language. The English language, is so much more harsher.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. ZB, I saw you remember what you wanted to say.
That is that pharma actually is our medicine stolen,
Yeah.
right? Like there is a book out there that gives you like all of our inventions and all the things that we have contributed to society. And it like it talks about like all the things that we were doing medically before the Muniog came here, and even after they were still here, we were still like doing those things. Pharma is just taking credit for our stuff that we originally knew.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I wanted to add.
And
Yeah. And
look
it's
at
so true. It's so true.
100%. Look at that Lakota arthritis cream. That was actually basically stolen from the Lakota people. I think they did get some type of what is the word I'm looking for? Like trademark, maybe
Hmm.
some kind of royalty. But it
Yes.
wasn't. From what I understood, it was a really poor deal, and they didn't get to see long-term benefit from sharing that with the pharmaceutical company. And you see this book? Do you ever see this book on TikTok? You see the ad, and the guy goes, "Oh yeah, look over here." Duk, duk, he points at these remedies, like old school remedies and stuff. How many of those remedies are from us and our people? And our people shared, right? They taught the newcomers some of the medicines to use.
Yeah. The Amish and the Hutterites actually maintain those medicines. If ever you guys want some real good stuff, the Amish and the Hutterites have, because they've lived with us long enough to know where to pick. They even do our berries now.
You know, the only thing about the Hutterites is I know that they use a lot of chemicals. Like they use herbicides and pesticides and
Yeah.
fertilizers. But they do, like they have a relationship with land too, but it's very commodified, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
how they make their wealth. Where we
Yeah.
saw it as our relations. I love that it's our relations and but yeah, that is so much has been taken from us. So like even thinking about back to what ZB was saying, that this is that we're the really like a resource too, right? So much of economy in Canada, and I would probably say in the United States as well, is built on meeting the current needs of Indigenous people. And how many of you have sat around a table where there's like some say it's a government or a corporation coming in to engage or consult with your nation, and it's non-Indigenous people sitting across the table, and they're called Aboriginal Relations Advisors or Indigenous Relations and things
Yeah.
like. And I was one of those. I did it for a company. I did it for government. But at least I felt a little more comfortable in the role being an Indigenous person.
Yeah.
And still to this day, my colleagues in this line of work, because I'm still in that line of work, are primarily non-Indigenous people. So corporations, government, look at ISK alone. How many staff are there, does ISK employ across this country?
Just
Right? Same
Very
when,
fitting.
yeah, same when that store came out, that JISK store. There's like we'll just put a little kia in front of it. Anyways, but
That's
like,
that's where the term shitty ass comes from, by the way. Grandma used to call us we just coming shitty ass.
yep. Mike will come too and say that to me. Oh my, but like, why? I started my career at Indian Affairs in 1997. In 1998, I became a full-time employee there. And even back then, they had a goal of meeting a certain, I think it might have even been 30% Indigenous staff was their goal. However, I don't think they've met it yet. And they seem to not be advancing Indigenous employees as much. It's changing, I think. Like it's happening more than it was then. But
Yeah.
that's 28 years ago already.
Yeah. All their quotas they have it's like what is it, DEI in the States, where you have to have meet a certain quota of black people or immigrant people and indigenous people in the within the organization. But with the bureaucracy that has been there since its inception as a Department of Indian Affairs, we used to fall under Department of Immigration, but the land, the very first acre of land that was sold by colonial Canada, the very first dollar they made off the sale of our stolen land. It's a stolen land. I mean, there's no doubt about it in my worldview. But when you look back, they always say we have trillions in trust. Why? How come we can't get our? Well, every dollar that was made from the sale of our motherland went into a trust account. That's why 9124 exists, because they have to account for every acre that was sold.
Yeah.
Of our motherland.
And so just for our listeners maybe folks don't know what 9124 is. So Section 91 of the Constitution Act of Canada outlines the jurisdictions of the provinces and Canada. So under Section 9124, Indians and lands reserved for Indians fall under the jurisdiction of Canada.
And then later on, 1931 was when they cut this shitty deal with the provinces. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's still, so then we just have now, and a lot of people don't even know this. And even when I worked in Louisville, we had a youth group there. And I was asking the kids one day, because I was spending an afternoon with the youth students. And I said, do you know who owns the reserve land? And none of them knew. Like one guessed. One kid said, oh, is it the chief? I was like, no, it's not the chief.
Yeah.
And when I told them it was government of Canada, that reserve lands are federal crown land, I felt like I could see them deflate,
Yeah.
It was sad. And that those things aren't taught in our schools, not even in our own First Nation schools or in schools in general. People don't have this as common knowledge.
Yeah. Well, you don't learn it in school. And where I really tore apart the Canadian Constitution when I took executive federalism in my political science courses. And 9124 is a piece of race. It's a racist provision within colonial Canada's constitution, because it assumes jurisdiction over our humanity and over our motherland without even uh, not getting one. We wouldn't have given our consent. Our treaty, their written version says we did, but our version has adopted a plow to symbolize exactly what our ancestors agreed to.
Yep. And I would even like that section 9124 is what outlined like is the fiduciary obligation of Canada to First Nations, but it also is what makes us a ward of the government in a way, right?
Yes.
We're the government's the parent and we're the children that need to be cared for. And so it is
It's
very problematic.
ludicrous. It's ludicrous. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that really by law, First Nations specifically because of the reserve land too and the Indian Act, we're seen as boards of the government.
Yeah. We can't own houses. We can't own land under Monial law, but under our own worldview, we're not meant to own land. We're not meant to own other human beings. And we're not meant to own life like our motherland to give for them to prostitute her sources of life. She needs every ounce of water. She needs every drop of oil. She needs every crystal that's in the ground, whether it's diamonds or whatever. Those creator put those there for a reason. It helps her survive, so we will survive.
Absolutely. And then I think about that's so profound what you said, and I think about that a lot. And so then we've pulled these resources out of the ground, and specifically like okay, gems and things. It's awful what we do to get to them. Even this, like I have a crystal here, I hang on to sometimes, and I have jewelry myself. Um, and we do all of this for what stature in a way, but then I think about oil and gas and with how much oil is used to produce plastics. So we pull this stuff out of the ground, we take the trees off the ground, we take the soils and all the medicines that were there, we divert and pollute the water as a result, and then we turn it into plastic that we throw into a landfill. And what benefit does that bring to Mother Earth? For at the after this is all said and done, we're just leaving these mounds and mounds of buried junk
Yeah.
that's not going to serve our beautiful mother.
Nope.
I know. And we've fallen into the trap too we of course and rightfully so in a way, like we want to have the same lifestyle as the rest of Canadians. So I hear people, oh well, you guys want to go back to the land, you'll never be able to live like you used to. I'm sure we could, but why would we when these are the luxuries that are available to us too? And we should be able to buy things and wear clothes and
Yeah.
have the luxury, the conveniences. But and we are pretty bad at being consumers now too as Indigenous people. Like when you just look at some of our dump sites,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. But how are we doing here? Oh, it's 7:30. And I love chatting with all of you. But tonight I do want to kind of cut it because I do have an early flight in the morning. My job does take me around. I've got a real busy month. I'm in Regina this week, and then I'm in the city. I'm just in Regina for tomorrow, and I'm back Wednesday. But then I'm in the city at the end of the week, and then off to Ottawa after that. And I'll be in Halifax, and oh my gosh, it's a crazy time. But it's good stuff because I get to meet beautiful people like all of you, and I get to have these types of conversations everywhere I go. And I learn so much every time we get together. Like you guys have become my friends. And I really appreciate that you spend your time with me and we have these conversations. And I'm hoping that we're reaching out more people and getting more folks interested in having this conversation with us. And I hope you're back with me next week. I'm going to turn it over and we'll do some closing remarks. So I'll start off with you, ZB, please.
I was gonna say, what do I have to do to job shadow you?
Well, we could chat.
Okay. I just want to say thank you to Elder Marie for sharing her wisdom. And the same with you. Um, and I hope you guys have a good week and y'all stay safe because it's getting wild out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Stop.
Same to you, darling. All right, Lisa Dawn, floor is yours.
I just want to say a huge thank you to you all. This has been a real pleasure. I enjoy these discussions very, very much. And I think about them, over the week between Monday and Monday. I think about what we talk about. And so, yeah, I really want to thank you all for your time and sharing space with me. That's all.
Thank you,
Kwahni.
Lisa. Go ahead, Marie.
Knanas komt now, kakyo. Kwaming kakyo sagit now. I am grateful for giving me space and time to share my thoughts with you as well. And kakyo sagit now means I love you all.
Hi, Kisa Keaton.
Yeah.
Curtis, my friend, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom, and really makes me think about things. And there's so much to think about. Like you said, the Mother Earth is all those precious minerals in our Earth, and yeah, that's good that you talk about those type of things in the Earth and the healing, and yeah, we need more of that, and it's good to remember those things. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. I really thoroughly always enjoy our conversations, and like I said, I truly do feel like we've formed a friendship and a community here. I'm hoping we can get more people to come and join us every Monday night on Beaver Politics at Indigenous Matters, 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. We're always open to any form of discussion around Indigenous issues, reconciliation, Indigenous rights, land, treaties, all of it is up for discussion. If you have any ideas or things that you really want us to talk about, please send them my way. Curtis, I still have your message, and I'm going to reach out to that gentleman that you've suggested, because I think that's a really good topic to talk about. Under the Indian Act, we have a section called that defines how our status, we were given numbers, like registration numbers, but then we also have a section of the Indian Act that defines our Indianness in some ways, but we'll talk about that in greater detail. So I got to reach out to him. So I'm not sure if it'll happen next week, but it will be coming soon. There's another topic I'd like to talk about again in the future is water. But please, anybody that wants to talk about anything, let me know. Send me a message. Remember, I'm Treaty 6 Birder. So if you want to get a hold of me directly, please message me there, follow me, and message me directly on my page, and then we can do a show here. I wanted to remind everybody, Beaver Politics Network has a show, at least one show, every single day of the week now. On Sundays, we have the Damn Happy Life with Happy, and he talks about happiness and success and sustainability and all kinds of really interesting conversations over there, and really good guests that he brings in. Monday nights is always Indigenous Matters with me, Treaty 6 Birder. On Tuesdays, we have the News Hour, and then that one's also at 8 o'clock Mountain or 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, hosted by Frontline Feminist, where she goes over for the first hour of her show is going over the headlines of the news of the week and kind of what's critically happening. And then we have discussion about that. And then on Wednesdays is the Mossy side with the Progressive Moose. And he's always got some really great conversations on some things that are happening in politics from his perspective. And he's also in Eastern Canada, so he brings that perspective to the show also. And we also on Thursday afternoons have Pixie Lee. She does Canadian history with a purple crayon. And Thursday evenings is the Beaver Politics Polytalk open discussion, where we just talk about three main issues or main matters that are going on that day or this week. And we all have some discussions on the panel there. On Friday, we have the Mrs. hosting the navigation station, where she shares with the visitors there on how to navigate our systems within Canada. And then Friday night is Polly Talk with Nerdy, and she goes for a full-on 6-hour debate. It's always a good time. She gets lots of folks in the room with her, and some really interesting conversations happening over there, and it's a lot of fun. Friday we have that was Friday. Sorry. Saturday is afternoon is Jana, and I, for the life of me, can't remember what her show is. Sorry, but we do have a video with all the shows out. I'm gonna have to write it down, make sure I recall it. But she talks about mental health issues and what we, giving some tips and on how to help you through mental health struggles and some open conversation with professionals and other folks that are willing to come and share their experiences. And then Saturday night we have Radicalized with Mr. Radical. So every night, every day of the week, we got something good coming on. And I really appreciate everybody that joined us today. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Safe travels.
Stay safe. Hi, hi, my friends.